I am Rabbi Kaba, bringing you practical wisdom from ancient Jewish scriptures. This week on Shabbat, Jews around the world are reading a portion of the Bible called Pinchas. This is in Numbers, about the 25th chapter of Numbers, near the beginning, to the first verse of the 30th chapter of Numbers. And this takes place right after the infamous episode where Balak hired Bilam, the prophet, to curse the Jews. God did not let Bilam curse the Jews, so he went home as a failure. But Bilam gave Balak and the Midianites and the Moabites the advice that God hates promiscuity and forbidden relationships of an intimate male-to-female nature. So he should send beautiful women to seduce the Jews. And this is what they did. And the Moabites, and especially the Midianites, sent their women to seduce Jewish men, and terribly they were successful in this, and 24,000 Jews died in a plague, and that's because they had given themselves over to this intimate immorality. And not only that, but they had worshipped idols. So how did that happen? How are these related? The women, when these Moabite and Midianite women seduced the Jewish men, and they were, acting very attractively and, seducing them verbally and perhaps disrobing somewhat. And the Jewish men were about to engage in an immoral act with these pagan women. And the pagan woman would pull out her idol and say, wait, first we have to worship the idol before we go to bed. So you can understand it's a terrible situation to be in the first place. And then they managed to seduce the men not only into bed for immorality of a physical bodily nature, but idolatry as well. So it was a double sin that caused all these men to terribly be killed in a plague for their sin with the women and with the idols. But not only that, our sages bring a tradition, and this tradition is really old, almost 4,000 years old, because there were Jews on the scene who recorded this as oral history, as midrashim. A lot of these stories end up in the Mishnah, the Gemara, the Talmud, passed down as tradition, as oral tradition from those generations who were there. And they say the idol that these Midianite women pulled out and demanded the Jews worship was someone called Baal Peor. Baal Peor is the lord of excrement, the lord of bodily functions, of excrement, of human waste. And the way they would worship Baal Peor was by defecating on the statue or in front of the statue, like the offering was the human waste. So this is utterly vile and reprehensible. It's like, how could people worship such a thing? So as an aside, we don't really understand the draw that idol worship had back then. Our sages also bring a tradition that after the destruction of the first temple, about 2,500 years ago, the prophets and the sages of that generation that was rebuilding the second temple, they prayed and they beseeched God to remove, or at least really hamstring the pull towards idolatry that people used to feel. Because idolatry was one of the causes of the unfortunate destruction of the first temple. So they were successful. The prophets and the sages prayed to reduce the pull towards idolatry. But before that, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, people really got into idols. You can understand, in America, they have American Idol. People get very attached. Even more so, the idol worshippers, the pagans, were into their idols, even this disgusting idol of Baal Peor that they used to defecate as their offering to Baal Peor. And sadly, Jewish men engaged in this form of idolatry. Our sages bring the eyewitness accounts. They got into this, and they weren't just doing it to get with the Midianite women. They were doing this as, hey, this is fun, this is great, this idolatry. How could it be, gentlemen, how could it be that they went so low? And that's the answer. They thought of themselves as being fallen so low. Think about where they are on a psychological state. They've just become willing. They've been seduced, and now they're willing to go along with sexual immorality with pagan women. And they say, well, if I'm doing that sin, I might as well do another sin just so I can do more of the first sin. I'll add another sin. I'm already a sinner. What's the big deal, another sin? I've already fallen. What's the big deal falling a little more? That was the attitude that allowed them to engage in idolatry, even disgusting, despicable idolatry. And this is a real danger that we face. When men think that they've fallen and they're at the bottom, then they'll do anything because they're already fallen. They're already in bad shape, so might as well keep doing bad things. And no sense trying to turn it around now. You're already bad. And this is a real problem. If a man identifies himself as a bad man, as a sinner, he can't change. He's a sinner. Why should he change in the first place? That's who he is. And it's a big mistake. Our sages teach us that we are holy and pure. Inside, our real root, our real soul is totally pure. You can't do anything to the soul. It's from God himself. You can't mess that up. But we get dirty. We make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. We get a little schmutz, but that's on the outside. That's like getting dirt on your clothing and your body's still clean because the clothing is protecting your body. So our soul is still pure. They say really the thing to do is you identify yourself as a good person who made some mistakes. And now you have some work to do to fix your mistakes, but really inside you're a good person. And that's really one of the keys to success in overcoming whatever mistakes you're making is your self-identity as a good person. There's something the Baal Shem Tov, one of the Hasidic masters, hundreds of years ago, he said, more than the evil inclination. That's like the power that draws a man to sin. More than he wants you to sin, he wants you to feel guilty and depressed because of the sin. He wants to immobilize you by making you feel like you're a sinner. We all make mistakes, but if you think of yourself as a good person who made some mistakes, you can still turn it around. This is one of the most powerful lessons from this generation that unfortunately succumbed to the twin sins of immorality and idolatry. They thought they were already at the bottom, so what's one more sin? But they didn't realize they were still a pure spirit that could turn it around any moment just by changing their actions, starting to get back on the right path, and identifying themselves as a truly good person. It's my blessing we should all have the right self-identity that allows us to improve ourselves every day. Be well, gentlemen. Please remember to like and subscribe.